The wind howled over the deserted highway, carrying with it the sharp, bitter bite of winter. Snow lay thick upon the asphalt, reflecting the pale light of the half-hidden moon. My car, a fragile vessel in this unrelenting desolation, had shuddered violently and given its final protest. Steam hissed from under the hood like some angry, forgotten spirit. Alone, with only the groaning wind and the white expanse around me, I realized I would have to leave it behind. I grabbed my coat and stepped into the cold. The snow crunched beneath my boots as I began walking, hoping, foolishly, that some village or farmhouse would appear along this frozen artery. The trees were black, skeletal, and their twisted branches seemed to point accusing fingers at me, mocking my desperation. Hours passed, or perhaps minutes. I had lost all sense of time, before I glimpsed a dim light in the distance. A solitary house, perched on the outskirts of a forgotten village, seemed almost to float upon the snow. Smoke curled from a crooked chimney, curling into the night sky like a beckoning finger. I approached, my breath clouding before me, and knocked on the door. No answer. A creaking sound, and the door slowly opened on its own, as if inviting me. Inside the room was dimly lit by a fire in a hearth so old it seemed carved from the earth itself. The air was thick with the scent of herbs and something else, something almost metallic, sharp and unplaceable. An old woman emerged from the shadows, her eyes glittering with a strange intelligence. "I suppose the cold drove you here," she said. Her voice was low, almost musical, yet carried an edge that pricked at my nerves. "Come, you shall warm yourself by the fire." I hesitated, but the cold gnawed at my limbs and forced my compliance. The door shut behind me, and the isolation of the place pressed against my mind like a weight. She offered me a seat, and I felt unreasonably that I had crossed some threshold from which there would be no return. The night was still, yet not peaceful. Shadows seemed to crawl along the walls, stretching and shrinking as if alive. The fire flickered, casting the old woman's face in grotesque relief, making her eyes seem larger, more predatory. She moved with a grace that contradicted her age, handling vials, herbs, and objects I could not name. "You must rest," she said. "The road is treacherous at this hour." And so I lay upon a crude mattress in the corner, the snow pressing against the windows, the wind whispering secrets I could not understand. Sleep came reluctantly, a fitful thing because the shadows did not remain idle. I awoke to the sound of chanting, soft at first, like the rustle of leaves. The room was unchanged, yet a chill pressed upon my spine. I looked toward the old woman, who was now kneeling before a small, intricately carved circle upon the floor, her hands raised as though invoking something unseen. The air thickened. The fire seemed to dim. Shapes, indescribable, began to coalesce in the corners of the room. I wanted to call out, to flee, but no sound emerged. The old woman's eyes met mine, and in that gaze I understood. She had been expecting me. Hours or perhaps minutes passed in a haze of dread. I saw forms that should not have been, faces without features, limbs that bent impossibly, shadows that whispered in languages older than humanity. The room itself seemed to pulse, to breathe with some unholy rhythm. "I warned you," the woman said, her voice now a chorus of whispers, as if many voices spoke through her. "The road brought you here, as it always does. You cannot leave what has been summoned." I wanted to scream, but the air was thick, almost solid, pressing against my throat. Panic clawed at my mind, yet there was a strange fascination. I felt that if I dared to look closer, I might glimpse truths too vast, too terrible to comprehend. The night stretched, an eternity of shadow and cold, and I realized that I was no longer in a simple farmhouse. The walls had grown taller, the ceiling stretched into darkness. The fire burned with a sickly green flame, casting forms that danced like phantoms. Outside, the wind howled as though the very mountains of Ukraine had become sentient, wailing for something lost, something forbidden. The old woman smiled. "Sleep, wanderer. Tomorrow you may continue your journey, if the road permits. But remember, there are places the living should never walk, and there are eyes that watch from the dark, always waiting." And so I lay again, shivering, yet unable to leave, for I knew that even if I survived the night, the road itself had changed me. And when I closed my eyes, I understood that the true horror was not in the shapes, or the shadows, or the chanting, but in the knowledge that some roads never end, and some houses never release those who enter. The night stretched endlessly. I tried to close my eyes, but sleep was elusive. The shadows in the room had multiplied. They crawled along the walls like living ink. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of wind, felt deliberate, as though the house itself were aware of my presence. The old woman, my host, or perhaps my captor, sat by the fire, murmuring words I could not understand. At first they seemed harmless, like the muttering of an old lady to herself, but the tones deepened, resonated, and the fire's flame twisted unnaturally, green and flickering, casting the corners of the room into darkness that did not exist before. I tried to speak. My voice refused me. Even my movements felt alien, as if some invisible weight pressed upon my limbs. I realized with a creeping terror that I had not been entirely alone in the room. Shapes lurked in the corners, vague, shifting, impossible to describe. They seemed to breathe, not in rhythm with the air, but in time with some internal cadence of the house. I wanted to look away, but some compulsion, older than thought itself, drew my eyes back. The woman's chanting stopped abruptly. Silence fell. Then she spoke my name, slowly, deliberately, each syllable like the tolling of a bell in some forgotten temple. "You are here because you wandered," she said, "because you sought warmth in a place where warmth is forbidden. The road brought you, and the road always delivers what it promises." I shivered. What is this place?" I whispered. She smiled, a strange, knowing smile. "It is the junction between what is seen and what should remain hidden. You are neither dead nor truly alive in its presence. You are observed." The air thickened. A presence, vast and unseen, pressed against the walls. My mind felt simultaneously stretched and compressed, as though I were peering through dimensions too vast for comprehension. Shapes shifted in the corners of my vision. Tentacles, branches, fingers. I could not tell. They were everywhere and nowhere. Panic clawed at me. I wanted to flee, to run back into the snow, but the door had vanished. The walls had grown taller, darker, closing in. The fire's glow reflected countless eyes upon me. Eyes not human, not animal, but something far older, gazing through time and understanding far beyond my mind. And then the old woman laughed, not a normal laugh, but a resonance that shook the room's foundations. "You cannot leave, wanderer," she said. "Not until you understand." I understood only that I did not understand. Every logical thought crumbled under the weight of the room, the fire, the eyes, and the shadows. And yet, slowly, the fear transformed, A dreadful fascination replaced terror. I realized I was part of the house now, part of the night, part of the observing shapes. Hours passed, or perhaps days. I could not tell. My perception of time dissolved into an eternal present of green flames and whispering shapes. Eventually, the old woman ceased her muttering. She rose, stretched, and approached me. "The road awaits," she said, her voice gentle now. "But remember, what is seen here cannot be unseen. What is known here cannot be forgotten. You may leave, but a part of you will remain. And if you return to the road, you will carry what lies between the walls." The walls shivered. The shadows receded. The fire dimmed. And then, slowly, impossibly, I found myself standing at the edge of the forest. The house had vanished. Snow still fell. The wind still howled. The highway stretched before me, empty, silent. I stumbled back to my car, somehow returned to the reality I had known, yet changed. My hands shook. My mind raced. The road seemed narrower, darker. Every tree along its edge seemed to watch. Every shadow seemed pregnant, with intent. I drove. The engine coughed to life. The lights cut through the darkness, but nothing felt safe. I knew I had glimpsed what should not be glimpsed. I had seen the junction. I had met the woman who walked between the worlds, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled my soul, that the winter road and that house were never truly behind me. Even now, when I close my eyes, I see green flames dancing on the walls. I hear whispers in the wind, voices older than memory. I feel the observing shapes, always just at the edge of perception. The road goes on forever, and so do the shadows.